Welcome to the Behind the Vision podcast. In this episode with Ray, we explore his start to becoming an architect, creating spaces with simple resources, and his solo trip to work in Ecuador. Hope you enjoy the show. How did you become interested in design and architecture?
So yeah, like I was saying, I'm not really sure exactly how I got into it or like interested initially. Yeah, I had a big appreciation for kind of my grandparents' house on northern Minnesota. It's like in the forest with the water on the shoreline and all those natural qualities. Kind of with that building there was like something special, and then all the family and friends using it, I was like, something's going on here. And then I think my cousin, actually, he's not practicing architecture anymore, but I learned when I was like in fourth grade, he was doing architecture school. And I was like, well, what's architecture? And it was like building and design, and I was like, oh, that's right where I want to be, I think. Dang. I was like probably 8, 9 years old.
Yeah, so it was like this almost this natural instinct of like seeing was it your grandparents' house?
Yeah.
So like you just naturally felt a pull to it almost, and then you had your cousin that was in fourth grade that was like, he was in fourth grade and he was doing design architecture stuff?
No, dog. So he was in college and I was in fourth grade.
Oh, my bad. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so clear things up a bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, he was, 20 and I was, 8, 9 or whatever fourth grader is. And yeah, like you said, kind of just like naturally drawn to that like space of like, oh, like, you go to a beautiful park or forest or building, and I kind of would take note and really appreciate that. And yeah, I was like, it's got to be something real about, real space, real building, and being able to contribute to cool environments and positive spaces like that. I was like, just kind of stuck with it. And throughout, as like in the back of my mind, I was like, I was playing hockey and other things, but I was like, yeah, I kind of just want to do this, I guess. So
yeah. I mean, you're doing it like full time now, which is awesome. But I was like doing a deep dive on your Instagram before this, and I mean, you were posting way like years ago, almost maybe when you were like in high school or college maybe. And I came across this photo of you were with 2 other people, but it looked like you did like a architecture competition where you had to like build models. And I remember looking at your model, and then your model looked so much superior to the other 2 models almost, because it was just like you built out this entire like landscape with a house. Oh. And the other 2 models just had like houses. I don't know if you remember that at all.
Oh, true. Like, yeah, that was probably in like school or something.
Okay.
And it was probably a group project or something, or I don't know if it was a competition, but yeah, different. It's funny you say the one or mine looked superior, because it was probably just like different approaches to the model or what we needed to do or something. So I'm gonna deflect the superior comments.
It just looked really cool, I guess.
So
yeah, that's awesome. I'm just trying to find the photo, but if
not,
back
no
in
worries. Oh, true.
Yeah, it was back on Instagram.
Way back.
Jeez, I don't think.
Oh yeah,
I'm
it was probably in college,
but
early college.
Yeah, so you went to college for architecture design. What was that like for you? Where did you go to college?
Yeah, so I went to architecture school at the University of Minnesota here in the Twin Cities. It was a great experience. It was kind of lots of different strategies, classes, approaches, to whether it's design or the science, the materials and methods of, architecture, the people involved, like the sites and the places involved. And I think it's good for every student, including myself, just to kind of see really how much of a big scope that architecture is involved in. You know, it's involved in small scale and it's involved in really large scales. And so, yeah, I met one of my best friends. He's actually a musician now, but we both share a lot of architectural projects. And, you know, I sometimes jam with him with music stuff. And I think it just kind of speaks to like architecture and life being like really like tied to each other. And I always kind of think about that. Met a professor, my professor Gabriel, who's now my friend, that really like was like, oh yeah, like gave me a lot of confidence of just like, you know, doing the kind of architecture and the kind of approach to architecture that I'd been being guided towards, but like I didn't know if it was possible to practice in that way. Which is saying, you know, you truly can have a agency as an architect to use, you know, good materials, to have like a simplicity, to have a overall approach to and an attitude in architecture that can really generate good relationships between people and places. And you know, it's just funny because I'm finding myself, you know, doing the architecture stuff, and whether it's a built project or a competition or an unbuilt project, it always feels like yeah, like it's not like a job or anything like that, you know.
Just love it.
I just really love it, and I think it's like yeah, it's something I'm grateful for at the end of the day. I think as any person that's grateful for what they do, if you can find a space to do that, I think it's a really special thing. And you know, kind of providing for yourself or people around you is part of it too. But like, if you're able to find a space that you can do something that you're interested in, and you kind of take a constant research or perspective of how can I, you know, better myself and the people around me in this environment. And that's a space that architecture has allowed me to do. And kind of a long tangent there from school, but you know, it's bound to happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. So like one of your like school teachers in college like gave you the confidence to look at architecture differently. Okay.
Yeah.
More of like, it seems kind of like he gave you more of a trendy freelance approach to it almost, where it's like, hey, there's a lot of things that are going to be standard, but like be willing to do what you think would be best when it comes to architecture, and be willing to take the risk to kind of go on your own path with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and that professor, in the same way that, you know, architects and my architecture professor inspire me, is like how any, you know, musician, filmmaker, you know, anything, like you could be making, you could mowing lawns or something, you know. But any sort of person that has like really been focused and has like a kind of care for what they do, to kind of go out and not just like just kind of do it as what they're doing, which is okay too, you know. Sometimes you have other passions besides your craft. But yeah, Professor Gabriel really kind of gave me that confidence to continue doing what I was doing, and the approaches too, of just like, you know, almost like a return to some really simple concepts of building and architecture that somehow get lost in standardization of buildings and the quickness of how you can build and to turn a profit. But he gave me the confidence to return to some really key, you know, qualities of architecture, of, you know, using basic materials and methods, you know, that builders 200 years ago could achieve with bricks and, you know, whether it's concrete, earth, wood, a lot of those really simple materials and building strategies, they inspire me, you know, and are directly how I almost practice today, with a sort of a, you know, contemporary approach to space and how we live now, but with really basic approaches to how you can build something. You don't need a team of hundreds of skilled people to put together a house. Like sometimes it only takes a couple people that know how to, hoist a wood post and like pour a concrete post foundation and screw some things together. If under the right guidance, which is what an architect can do, you can really simplify the process. And I'm pretty interested in that and in the works right now. So
nice. You ever watch those YouTube videos of those people that will like build a house just out in the middle of nowhere, just with like natural resources? You ever watch those videos?
Yeah. I watched some of those and follow lots of architects. And there's a good example of like an architect in London that all of their projects, they strive to use I believe they're called local works. Shout out to Local Works, I think in London. They try to use basically any excess material on the landscape of their project to build whatever project they're building. So if there's any sort of huge rock rubble or, forest is in turn and a lot of the trees are available or they're able to source from another waste stream, a different site to this project. Basically, they're always using like materials that already exist or they're not buying off the shelves. So yeah, kind of similar to what you were saying, like really just slowing down and kind of using your wit to like work with what you have to make something that can be pretty special based on just like a really simple means of like supplies. So
yeah, that's cool. Just like using the stuff that's in like your surroundings of what you're building, almost just using like those resources already there.
Right. Yeah.
Is that more expensive or like harder to do, or can you like fit it in to your development pretty easy if you were to just use what's already there?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about communication and the contractors and people you're involved with any given project. And I just think in the States, and in Europe too, and other places in the world, like you get used to certain methods, of, okay, we're going to get these materials off the shelf and the contractors know how to do that. But, I'm big on if you can communicate from the beginning a certain process and communicate it clearly and effectively, that can work just as well. So, and actually save money and materials. So, I think, there's projects that illustrate that. I mean, that studio in London illustrates it. Just takes a bit of effort on the front end and a bit of, communication and direction really to say, okay, we can do this. So,
yeah.
Dang.
Kind of going back to college, what was it like for you making the leap from everything you're going through in college, like understanding the process of architecture, to then going out in the real world and starting to like take on some projects that way?
Yeah. I think kind of around that third year of school is when I met Gabriel. I was probably, I would have been a junior. And it was kind of around that time where a lot of people were getting internships in the cities and stuff. And I just wasn't inclined to do so. I think with a lot of the way that, and no disrespect to any of the companies and practices here in the Twin Cities, there's a lot of great practices and people, but I just wasn't drawn to what was happening. And that gave me I was a little bit insecure, honestly. I was like, I saw all these projects happening kind of on the themes of what we were talking about, of really simple strategies, simple uses of materials to make really beautiful space. And I wasn't seeing that. And time I met Gabriel, and we shared an interest in a lot of these projects, whether it's in South America or Europe, of these small offices and their building projects. And one day he saw me reading a book from these architects in Brussels and this architect in Japan. It's their office KGDVS and Go Hasegawa, and very inspirational people to me. But anyways, Gabriel saw me reading this book and he's like, "Oh, that's a great book. Like, I love that book." And he's like, ask some questions. We talk about it, and he's like, "You should apply there." And I was like, "Wait, what?" I was like, "What do you mean apply there?" And he's like, "Send them an email, like show them your portfolio, your website. You have a beautiful like content and work." And he's like, "Yeah, apply there or apply to a place like that." And I was like, "Wow, like, okay, like I guess you reach out to some people that you're really inspired by, and even if it doesn't come to any, even if it doesn't materialize, it's still like a really positive, like interpersonal way to go about practice." So I did it. I did that with them, and actually my first employer, Juan Tome of Tome Studio in Ecuador, and Juan got back to me first, and so then I moved to Ecuador, and we did some really simple, beautiful house projects together. So
You did that your junior year of college or right out of college?
So that was right out of college. So that kind of
Nice.
whole year after meeting Gabriel, or half a year, semester after meeting Gabriel, I was kind of going through that process, and yeah, it's different for everybody, and I just stayed true to honest to my heart and myself of how I want to practice and who I want to learn from, and how I can have a kind hand on anyone that's involved in my work, and hopefully to make something beautiful. And I ended up I was working a server job through college. I would just make my own projects. I would do competitions. And ultimately, when I did want to work and find people, Gabriel gave me the confidence to just reach out, and it materialized. So it's a beautiful thing, and I'm grateful for this today, to this day. So
that's sweet. So you ended up moving down to Ecuador then to join like their team. Mm-hmm. What was that experience like? I mean, you probably were like, doing some. Was that your first paid gig out of college?
Yeah. So exactly. So and it was just one architect, Juan Tome, and so the team literally was me and him, and there's a lot of small groups of architects practicing in studios of 5 to 10, and this architect in particular, Juan, who I'm still friends with, if you listen to this, Juan, shout out to you. You're a beautiful man.
Let's go.
So yeah, I got down there. I had a little bit of Spanish background, but nobody speaks Spanish in Ecuador, in Quito, the city in which I moved.
What do they speak?
Well, Spanish. Nobody speaks English.
Did I say that? Yeah, he said nobody speaks Spanish, and I was like,
they speak nothing. No. So yeah, nobody speaks really English, or at least in practice, day to day. So luckily, Juan knew a little bit of English, and I knew some Spanish, and it was awesome. Like, we had this direct. It's like kind of like math, the universal language of like everybody in different language can read that, and numbers, maybe. Same way with visual architecture and space. We communicated through drawing, with pen, with the computer, with the collage, and obviously with words. But the main kind of backbone of our communication really was, architecture and design. And it's like, wow, just to be welcomed in, and to be in a relationship of respect, and lots of just respect for someone that's 20 years ahead of me, kind of doing the same thing I was aspiring to do, of sticking true to the ideas and the values they really care about. And just a beautiful friendship to this day, and really grateful for that. So
so was it the style that interests you to go and work for him?
Yeah, so kind of hitting back in on some of like those ideas of really simple materials and methods. I saw a lot of Juan's projects from his website, and they're using really basic strategies. I saw a lot of simple steel frames, framing homes and spaces. And I kind of obviously use my context clues of it's like 60 to 70 degrees year round in Ecuador. So you don't need a lot of insulation or kind of heating and cooling. And so Juan took advantage of that, used his context, and basically stripping his spaces to mostly steel frames or brick and steel projects. And it's just this really basic simplicity that allows these spaces to shine, and people are living in them and making them their own. Sort of that simple understanding, those simple framing principles that give a freedom to the space at the end of the day. And kind of one of the ways I like to approach architecture and talk about architecture to this day is as a kind of a gentle frame for life. So architecture being the gentle frame, and then allowing any sort of life to unfold within it. So it's not an overly restrictive or overly dominant force, but it's something that serves its purpose, and ultimately allows the user or the users to live their life. And that was extremely evident through Juan's work. All of the sites shine through, it's all the places that they're in are kind of at the forefront, and then the architecture is kind of sitting and framing gently these places. And one of the projects we did was it's a outside inside project, and it was like an extension wrapping around this existing beach property of Juan's cousin. Mm-hmm. And the project was literally a 3 meter by 3 meter steel frame grid box that hosts a variety of spaces of couches, laundry, kitchen, a small jacuzzi, like a ping pong table. But the project itself is literally this steel frame box that wraps around the retaining wall of the property. Mm-hmm. And with a few point light fixtures, I think it was less than $10,000 to make a really beautiful project that kind of, takes advantage of its site, and it doesn't overdo anything. So just a really inspiring person and relationship.
Yeah. How long did you work for him for?
It ended up being about 8 months in total. And so I only lived there for around 3, because that's how much my visa was. But I worked remote a lot, and we'd talk and share, and just absolutely grateful for the experience altogether.
So you came back to the U.S. after your visa was up?
Yep.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. What was your biggest takeaway from having worked with him, and that being your first paid gig in the architecture space?
It was extremely confidence building. It was extremely healthy and exciting as a contract of work to have, because it like I said, it gave me an example of someone that's practicing, that's very true to a simple logic and beautiful spaces. And it was really just seeing that happen. I think that's the main takeaway. Mm-hmm. Seeing and working and saying, okay, me and whoever I'm working with, we can make something really beautiful and have a conversation, and get to the bottom of what we're trying to accomplish. And not overdoing it, and not saying, oh, we need to force the issue, or it needs to be, so much money or something, or it needs to be done only in this way, I think it was just seeing someone that was having a really beautiful approach to their craft and caring about it, and kind of applying that into myself, as I was there and afterwards. So yeah, absolutely amazing.
Nice. I actually have a question from Ryan, kind of on the Ecuador part.
Yep.
When you were down there. And he asked, what's the biggest thing you learned about yourself solo living in Ecuador?
Yeah, solo living in Ecuador, biggest thing I learned about myself. It's a great question, Ryan. Thank you for the question. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I think what comes to mind, I'm going to go with the first thing that comes to mind, and that's gratitude. Gratitude for myself. And that might sound selfish, but just the gratitude of um, being able to live and being able to I guess realize that if you want to go in a direction, you can make it happen, and you might run into struggles of monetary or limitations that don't allow you to do it, and there's going to be hiccups, but yeah, it was a situation where I wasn't making very much money, but I was thankful for myself to stay true to my heart, to practice architecture in a way that I believe in, and just the gratitude for the people around me in terms of in Ecuador and my friends and family and all the beautiful people there that I gained to trust. Yeah, so just the gratitude for the beautiful world around, and yeah, the in myself of realizing, okay, yeah, you can take an approach that you have some say and that you want to do. Just the gratitude for making that step in that direction. So,
I mean, it's awesome that was your. I mean, I've probably said this before, but I think it's so cool that right out of college you have this opportunity to travel, but also learn for someone that's doing it like 20 years. Like that's an awesome opportunity. When you were living there, like what was your day to day like? Did you stay in like a hostel? Did you stay at his place?
so I no, so Juan actually offered me to stay at his place. At the time, I already booked out Airbnb, or sorry, it was a Verbo,
Okay.
Verbo, um, for this little apartment studio, tiny, probably 350 square feet, but the owner, Sandra, who is just an amazing person. Sandra is definitely not going to see this, but shout out to you, Sandra. I love you. Um, she was the most wonderful host. She lived in the bottom floors, and I lived in the top in this studio apartment that was amazing. It was kind of glass views all the way around, and
Dang.
yeah, it was probably like built like 30 years ago. So the day to day was kind of, Juan lived probably a 5 minutes walk from me, and similar to what I'm working with now with my collaborator Julie, me and Juan would kind of work remote and then meet as needed in person, or with client, but ultimately working from where we lived with our Wi-Fi connections, making it happen. So yeah,
That's awesome.
we meet at cafes, we'd meet at Juan's apartment, but yeah, just kind of working based on a purpose, based on solving problems and then making a solution. So really not overworking or not underworking, basically. Yeah.
What was the culture like in Ecuador, and did you do anything that was maybe different of what you do back here in the U.S.? Like, did you go surfing at all? Did you do anything wild and crazy?
Oh man, like, yeah, so it's just a beautiful country. There's so much going on geographically and culturally in terms of the activities there. You have surf towns, the one called Montanita, that's just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
Met some wonderful surfers there. I'm not a surfer by any means, but got to dabble, got to experience that lifestyle of like, oh, these guys, these people are really surfing full time, and actually the surfers we met that were their form of, or the way of earning was they had a small hostel there and they would just run that and then surf. So
Nice.
yeah, there's there's mountain. The town I lived in was based in the mountains, so lots of hiking and mountain biking, and activities based around the slopes there. You have to the west, or sorry, to the east, you're getting closer to the Amazon, so there's lots of cultures based around the rivers there with rafting and kayaking, and there was some gentleman that took me on these tours around one of the runoffs of like the Amazon, and then they spend, I think it was like half their days out of the year on the water, so at, like time wise, and it's like it's awesome seeing and kind of relating that to architecture. And what I stand for is all of these cultures, their buildings and their spaces were directly responding to how they lived, to the materials around them, what they had available, and their lives were at the center of all of those towns and those spaces, and the architecture was allowing them to be that, but it wasn't something external or something overbearing that was kind of limiting or making it something that's not. And so it's really inspiring to see. And a lot of times it's just the local builders and people there making use of what they have, and to me that's really inspiring as an architect, because I want to incorporate that kind of responding to those simple building strategies, and how you can make space around those. So
do you have a favorite city that you've been to where like you get there and you're just in awe of the buildings and the structures?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't, I'm gonna stay on theme and answer right off my gut. I don't have any key cities that come to mind in terms of buildings. It's more approach based, and I think cities are beautiful because there's so much variety in approach, and in buildings. And here in the Twin Cities, for example, you have the old historic districts of brick buildings, right, of new concrete foundations and concrete columns and steel and all these things going on in the city. In the States, probably New York, seeing like Chelsea and Soho and those districts of those beautiful brick buildings, I'd say those. But if I could cheat, it would probably be like my experiences in Ecuador, because all those little towns and stuff, they're fully using, the wood and like concrete cinder blocks, like only to build their projects. And that was like, or steel frame or whatever they had. It was just like, dang, like this is so, they're just so witty and smart with their material use, and it's like just a direct response to what's there. So not a favorite city, but more of like just kind of seeing the diversity is super cool, and then seeing the approaches of like a specific place. So
the way that Ecuador, like how they structure their buildings, was interesting. And like I'd love to know, do you value more of like the space that you live in, or like the property that it's on in terms of like location wise?
It's a great question. And this is something that I learned, this whole area of property is one of the biggest takeaways of what Gabriel does, and what I learned from Gabriel. It all starts with the land, right? So with the place you are, and property is a response to that, who owns it. And so I can't answer one or the other is more important. I think there's a fundamental quality to land and property that's there, and architecture a lot of times comes after that, and it's directed by property. And one of the things I learned, and it was really interesting, I can't remember who said it, but there's the idea of like architecture with humans is inevitable. So humans we need to create space in some way. We need to frame something on our places that we are, the land, the property. So the best answer I could give is neither one or the other, but in the right scenarios, the relationship of the two is something that only a humans can achieve. And I think there's something really beautiful there, that it's the relationship of those things at the end of the day, that humans are basically always in relationship with their buildings and the property and the place they live. So that's why a simple approach and a site and cultural specific approach is something I really value. And that, a building is not stronger than the place it is, and the place it is isn't stronger than the building. So bit of a cheater, but I gotta stick true,
Yeah, I mean the part about the humans being like the only people that are like species, I guess, that could factor in like where they're building, but also what they're building. Because sometimes you'll see like birds building nests in the worst possible spot, maybe. I don't know if that is kind of what you're getting at there, of like just like maybe animals, like they'll build their spot anywhere regardless of location.
Yeah. And so I guess you mean like animals sometimes seem dumb with how they're choosing?
Yeah. So, like sometimes my dog will just post up on some like toys and sleep on them.
Yeah, right. And sometimes humans will do that same thing, and with architecture and development, it's like, why the hell did you do that? Like there's this or that right next to it, or that we took away just to make this happen. It happens all the time. I think it's just, it's humans, it's, I think sometimes we're really hard on ourselves, and it's good to do, but to also really have a gratitude for us as humans of what makes us human, and to really try to strive for the best, at least dumb approach, that like sitting on your toys or something instead of like it's comfy pillow.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What does your like process look like when someone reaches out to you, and are they just like, hey, I want to build something? Like, what do you try to like take them through to completion for it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's like different for every architect and every person. And so I'm working with an architect, collaborating. Her name is Julie Taylor. And so I'm mostly working full time through her, but I'll do freelance projects as well that I have on my website. And that, I'm always kind of taking on new design prompts and all these things and competitions. But for every person that comes to us or comes to me or comes to me and Juan or me and Julie, it starts with, what is the problem, or what do we need trying to do? What's the prompt? What's the goal of the person we're working with? And then, to make a short answer, it's how can we do it, and how can we make it happen? There's a architect in Sweden named Johan Arhav of Henrik Frick, and he says that it's a really inspiring passage about approach, and it's if you understand the problem based on its conditions, you'll have the solution. And I just did a really short answer of, what is the problem, we'll find the solution. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on, but it's fundamental to my approach as an architect to not over design or overdo, or kind of do more than or less than what's ultimately necessary, exactly in the space of what is needed. It can really create something beautiful and let the life shine in that space. And so more detailed, we'll take a survey of a site, what's going on with the topography, with the infrastructures, and then we'll move into design conversation of what do we want to do, how much do we have to work with in terms of money, general guidance and approaches as you would with any sort of design conversation or question. And in terms of my approach specifically as a designer, I think I have a kind of specific means of tools that I use in terms of sketching. Me and Juan will communicate through sketching, designing, but then we have a pretty basic approach of how we show our work, and that's using simple like CAD, like 2D software, and like this software called Rhino. It's a 3D software, and we'll make simple plans, floor plans, sections, which is basically a cross section of a plan that shows the heights and the building from the side, and then also 3D images. And I'll do a lot of 3D images through collage and Photoshop, and like basically as it would appear in full rendering, but through the method of collage. And sometimes my images might look more in the realm of like a rendering, but it's actually always a collage. And I think there's something really important for me in that way of you have an intention of every view you show as an image, and with a collage you need to start from that still of like a certain view, versus a rendering from a model. There's like millions of images you can generate from it. With collage, it's like you have an intention on a specific view and why it might mean something to the space. And you're ultimately realizing what that full space feels like once it's built. And I think there's something really important to that. And so, yeah, it's a lot of back and forth. Sometimes it's very quick, and sometimes it's the first solution, and sometimes it's the 20th. And a lot of the times it comes down to the client and how they like to work, how present they are in terms of, this or that. Or sometimes they'll be like, oh no, like go ahead and, I want to see exactly what you respond to with this question, So it's different for every project, but going back to that, if you understand the problem, you have the solution, like a math equation. You don't need to overcomplicate or overshow your work. It's there when the project starts. So
yeah. So when you're working with like another person, do you share mock-ups with them as they come, or do you share like a full render of like what their space could look like?
So yeah, I mean a little bit of both. Well, a lot of times we'll use plans to communicate. We'll use reference images of old projects and say, okay, here's how this part of the plan will feel based on, where we are in this room. And then here's like an example of a project that has a similar material or spatial quality. And then as the process goes on, we'll use collage and show those real like rendered images. And then it'll be like, we'll do this or we'll do that. And it's all about specifying and just getting closer to what that space is going to be and exist as. And I think it's something to learn and important that, you can ultimately at the end of the day, it's a real built project. And you're striving for the best built solution of a building and not for what it appears as on screen, right? So these architects in Brussels, they hit that really well. The ones of the book I was reading, and on the idea of, you're always striving for a built solution or a real solution, and not sort of the methods of communication making it something that it's not, or something that is surreal. It's always very grounded in how can we be most true to what is being built here. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Nice. And do you spend most of your time doing design, or do you spend it doing other things as well?
Oh, yeah, probably not most of the time doing design, because we design on such a simple basis based on the prompt of what building and the client and the site, So we're very natural. We're very inspired by simple design methods. So design itself actually doesn't occupy a ton of our time. But it's different types of design, I guess. So we're always trying to hone in and get a grasp on basically how to execute whatever we're doing, and communicating with the builder, communicating with the mechanical crew, communicating with city people, of how, and as an architect, you're kind of directing the whole building process, so you're running material estimates of cost and all of these things, and design is the gel of that thing. But for us as designers, we don't overdo it or over design. We always stick true to a response to whatever the problem is, and then negotiation there. But it often ends up being, how we communicate the design we're spending time on, and how we can communicate with others what we're trying to get done. So yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, Callie asked a similar question kind of to that. You might give the same answer. She asked, what is your creative process for starting new projects?
Yeah, thanks, Callie. It's a good question. It's always in relation, when we start a new project, as I was hitting on about communicating with the client what's going on in the plan with the previous project of some other architect or us. The creative process, I think it's always inspired by existing projects and existing buildings, because it's what is there as history. It's what works with material, works with simple materials of wood or brick or whatever you're using. And we're up in Minnesota, so it gets really cold, and we always are taking influence from projects of Sweden and Finland, Norway, that are dealing with similar climates to us. So whenever we start the creative process, we're designing, we are creating this space from scratch, but we're kind of sampling, just as a DJ or artist does, all of these different material concepts, and then we're hybrid creating a space that is their own, But it's important to note, in the world of architecture, you're always working from, materials and methods, or I think it's to the benefit to work from existing materials and methods, and kind of hone and create based on those, versus trying to reinvent the wheel every time, so it's actually the creative process is, on one hand, it starts with the site, with the place that it is, with the building, and then us as designers framing, okay, here's how the space might look, and then incorporating all of these buildings and beautiful projects that already exist, and saying, okay, here's how we can do this, how we can do that. And you talk to any architect that exists, or that I've been inspired by, and they'll say the same thing about history is now, in the sense that all the buildings of the past that are built are existing now. So it's what we have to work from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where do you usually go to for like inspiration on projects? Do you stick to like Pinterest? Do you got some other platform you use?
So again, it's all these existing projects. I follow a lot of different architects and have like a inspiration pool of a bunch of images in my computer, in terms of the inspiration for a project, like how the space is going to be, it's always very natural. It's always very inspired by the person or us, of like, okay, here's how we will design it. But yeah, no, it's never like I never find myself looking for inspiration. Actually, it's always just like very based on the problem and the condition we have. We're making something there, and yeah, I always think it's really interesting of that conversation of inspiration. Because I don't know if I ever am like actively looking for inspiration. It's more okay, like there's this material joint connection. How can we do this based on historical precedents, and so that will be an example of like of a of use of like a precedent example. But in the beginning of the design process, it's always very inspired by the site, maybe the trees, the landscape, all the natural conditions, the people, the culture that is there, and then really just letting that framework come out, and I can't give an answer to what that is. It's part of my brain at the end of the day, but I'm always just inspired by the most existing things that are already there, ready for the project to respond to. So
yeah, it kind of seems like you're almost taking like where you see and what you see as the problems, kind of. For so if someone wants to like build a house and they have an exact idea for it, you're not literally looking for inspiration, you're looking how to connect the dots to like create and solve what maybe they're actually like looking for.
Exactly. Yeah. It's guiding them and helping them visualize through a process that ultimately they're going to be living, and I think it comes back to those qualities that I can't put a finger on that led me to doing architecture, that allows me to have a conversation with someone about a space that doesn't exist yet, and to show them, when there's nothing on the site, that here's what can happen, here's what we can make based on these materials and methods, and even just going back to property, even just the property itself and the property lines, the site, that can have a huge influence on the shape, the layout, and how it can engage that place and its even that most basic boundary of the place.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite part about like what you do, and do you have like a least favorite part?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I don't have a immediate answer that comes to mind. I I don't have a favorite and a least favorite part. It feels so kind of like personal to me. So it's just like well, it's just kind of a constant work in progress, and I think it's like practicing architecture. It's literally always there's always something happening, and I guess yeah.
Is there anything you enjoy more than the other things? Are you like, oh yes, I get to do this?
Yeah. Well, I really do. Oh man, I really do love getting to that point where you're drawing. I love drawing. I love AutoCAD. I love creating images, communicating that to someone. So man, yeah, to see, and it feels really natural, but I guess you brought it out in a good way of like to see and to communicate that point where there's a project starting to happen. Okay, here's the plan. Here's the initial ideas of what the space might feel like. And to see the person you're working with or the people you're working with, like, oh yeah, like I can see, and it's like, oh man, that's beautiful. It's like you're giving that food for thought that they couldn't achieve themselves, without the guidance of someone that can spatially see it.
Yeah.
And it's using the tools I have as an architect and my thought process, and seeing that moment in that communicative effort between groups of people is really amazing.
Yeah, you're like helping them create their vision for them that they weren't able to articulate and like put together, and you're helping them put everything that they want together
Yes.
for their space.
Yes. And I think it's such a beautiful thing because whether you're working with groups of people or an individual, their personality, you wanting to let them breathe and show who they are through this whole process. And as I mentioned earlier, some people are showing themselves through this really kind of engaged, kind of problem solving, constant feedback thing, and they just like to do that because that's them. And there's people that say, no, like I want to see exactly how you might frame this or what that earliest response to the problem is. And it's just a beautiful thing of all these different people kind of really showing who they are, and you're just guiding that and making a space at the backbone of it, and that they can use that. It's just like, yeah, that's why you do it, you know. Like it's just like it's pretty special. And to know that architecture is something that is inevitable as humans, to really appreciate those core values of what makes humans, and that interpersonal relationships and using each other's tools, and you're making each other help realize something like that's only possible between the two of you, you know. So yeah.
Would you ever design anything in the metaverse? Any VR design and architecture?
No.
No.
Hell no.
What if Facebook calls you over and they're like, "Hey, we need someone to be building some buildings in here. We got tons of plots of land, but
yeah,
no buildings."
Maybe for the meme, maybe just like throw on like DJ outfit and just like throw together some random shit in the softwares. But I think that'd actually be kind of funny. Like, oh, but I don't know, man. I don't know.
I mean, that'd be cool. I feel like just the architecture space in general, like having the ability to design it in like VR.
Yeah.
If you were to create something like that, and then you could show the people that you're like showing the initial mock-ups to, like, hey, here's what we're gonna build. You can almost like walk through it or something.
Definitely.
Yeah, that'd be sick.
Yeah. So like that metaverse would be like a direct response to like kind of that full realism, like of using architectural tools, you know. And I think there's kind of a funny like irony in that of like it is just like a digital space, you know. So it's like in that way it's almost probably just like, okay, it's all just kind of like a fun house without any like physical or gravity boundaries, you know. I don't know a lot about the metaverse, so I'm not gonna make a fool of myself here. But yeah.
When we Devin and I went to VCon, we saw a guy that was designing a banana in a VR space, so it's possible.
Oh, true.
I mean, he was going at it, lots of hand movements and gestures, so it probably definitely takes a while to get like functional with it, but I could foresee it in the future being something that like it could be offered, or it'd be cool.
Yeah. Definitely. Like I'm probably not the one that's gonna do it, but yeah. Whoever
you'll get someone else to do it.
Yeah. Dude, exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you have a goal or big project that you would love to work on or be involved on?
Yeah. It's not one in particular, but it's more scales of approach of like different buildings and different housing strategies, and just different approaches. Yeah, I guess at different scales of building. Like, I'm really in like operating in a smaller scale of architecture based on, whether it's like salons or homes or anything that I guess only a couple people could know, or that
Like a smaller team?
Yeah,
Kind of?
yeah, because so you can't obviously do like huge projects, you know.
Yeah.
You just need a lot more people directing that process to do those huge projects. I don't, and I don't have an interest to work on huge projects at all. I like stadiums and skyscrapers. I'm more interested in this really basic kind of from the roots of what a space is, you know. But it's an interesting question because I would love to be involved in a sort of I'm always so interested in housing strategies, so apartments and all these things, places that house, you know, many people, because I think at the end of the day, housing is essential. And as an architect, I think a lot of times it's an area that people get exploited through, and buildings and architecture and methods can kind of get exploited as well. And I would love, I mean, and I have done this already, but have worked on sort of speculative housing projects that are working from a really limited means of, okay, you can only use this amount of wood beams and like timber posts, you know, and trying to build a suggested apartment or housing situation from that. So to actually be involved in building something like that would be amazing. And it's one of those co-living collective scenarios of like, okay, there's 25 units here, and how can we use a very sites or location specific, say Minnesota, for example, using, you know, wood from the site or from surrounding sites to make a very fundamental like project based on like, yeah, the simplest methods, you know, wood beams, timbers, glass, all these things. Like
you kind of like being limited in that way where you only have so many supplies, but also supplies are like local. They're kind of unique in their style.
yeah, like a lot of the times with a lot of the new buildings in cities or anywhere is they're using a hybrid of different artificial materials perhaps. And so like the way the wall is built could use a number of vinyl or plastic or steel materials that are sourced from other factories from elsewhere. But to work on like a project of scale that is an apartment or one of those bigger projects that typically uses a lot of those materials, and just use like a really limited means of like, you know, whether it's concrete, earth, brick, wood, like any material that you could naturally kind of create to an extent, would just be a really interesting project. And there's a few of those projects, you know, that I look to and exist in the world. And in a short answer, I mean, it's like what happens in Ecuador with timber villages being built from, you know, what they have right on site there, and just kind of taking an approach of materials and methods like that, and as an architect directing a very clean spatial strategy there. So like using very simple geometries and spaces from those like materials. I think that would be amazing. So
Yeah, that'd be cool. I know we do have to go play spike ball a little bit.
spike ball.
But I do want to ask, so like you also really enjoy creating your own things. Like out of all the things you own, what percent would you say are things that like you created and things you just like get?
Oh, true. Wait, like what things you mean?
Yeah, sorry. So the jeans, like you have your creation on them.
Yeah.
I know you do a lot with like clothing.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of a wild cat when it comes to just like you know, my self-expression and what I do, and that's just me being me, of like ultimately, and how I practice architecture too is like staying true to like what comes most naturally to myself. And so in terms of like what I create, I kind of just fuck around with like, go into all the different sections of like thrift stores or wherever and just start saying like, oh, like what would I like to see? Like what would look cool, and then I'll just do it. And it's just fun. It's like everyone's living and dying, and it's like I just do me, and it's like it's fun when you realize like, oh yeah, you can email this person like that you look up to or whatever, and if anything, you can just have a appreciative dialogue with them and maybe even work with them. And that's the same way I see creation and furniture and clothes too, is like just kind of go for it. And
I love how your mindset just like carries in, like the same way you look at architectures, maybe in similar fashion to clothing. Like it's cool too, because you'll see other people in their focused careers and they take their mindset not only into like their work but just their life in general. They apply it to everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just something that I love, how I can be very specific and clear when it comes to architecture, of delivering a very clear spatial outcome, and being very focused about that. And then kind of at the same time, just letting that creative expression drive through that whole process of like through my body, through all the music I can listen to, through the things that exist there. So it's like, it's this constant approach of like refined and like chaotic energy happening. And it's just like, you're negotiating that like all the time. So yeah, you get that, again, that definition of how I approach architecture, of being a gentle frame for life. Because life is unpredictable, life is chaotic or it's laid back, but it's always dynamic. And then architecture is a chance to frame that and to make a space for that. So yeah, dude, it's those worlds, and it's just kind of funny. Super grateful to be doing what I do, and to see anyone that's, well, shit, I mean, fuck, you don't even have to be doing something. I'm happy to see you regardless of what you're doing. So yeah, just keep doing whatever you're doing.
Yeah, just love it and love the process,
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Sick. Well, to wrap up the podcast, if you were to leave your last piece of advice to your younger self, you got little Ray, what would that be?
What up? I just say, yeah. What's up?
Nice.
Yeah,
you got what's up from Ray.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get him off easy. I'm gonna let that little guy buck, That's the beauty of figuring it out,
Nice,
so,
dude.
I'm just gonna say what's up. What's up, my dog?
Love it.
Yeah.
Sick. Well, Ray, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. I feel like we dove a ton in the architecture, and it's been things that like we've chatted a little bit about, and it was cool just to hear like your process, how you got started with it. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, pleasure to be here. It's always great to have a conversation, and just hit on some things and talk about it. So,
sick.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you for tuning into the podcast with Ray. If you enjoyed it, please send us a DM on Instagram at BehindTheVisionPod or ever_north, or leave us a review, as we love to receive your feedback on the show. If you want to stay up to date on new podcasts and collection drops from Evernorth, check out evernorthco.com. Thanks again for listening, and hope you have an amazing day.